First off, a lot of rhetoric in his South Carolina speech there about jobs. Is this an effective way, you think, for the president to reach his supporters?
Well, if the goal is to reach his supporters, absolutely. He's just doing what he did throughout the entire campaign, which is, as you said, use a lot of this rhetoric, talk about jobs by basically just using the word jobs, jobs, jobs over and over. And his supporters seem to love it. The question, of course, is how he's going to govern beyond just, catering to those supporters. So what we've seen not only today, but in the last few days, is a president who is very comfortable in campaign mode. The question is, when it comes to actually governing, what that is going to look like. He mentioned all these plants coming back to the United States. There's no evidence of that yet, so he can talk about it, but it remains to be seen what it's going to look like.
You know, Gabe, the president now heads to Florida for the third time in as many weeks. This time for a campaign-type rally, as Major Garrett was telling us, is really to begin his campaign 2020 team. I can't believe we're already talking about 2020. The president, though, has already filed for re-election. Why do you think he's holding a rally like this now? Doesn't this kind of boggle the mind?
It does, but again, we should not expect that President Donald Trump is going to do things like any other president before him has. That's right, he has filed for re-election already. He's been talking about re-election even before he got inaugurated. This is just how he operates. Listen, it's very clear that he is more comfortable on the stump giving campaign speeches, riling up his base, than he is doing the dirty work of governing so far. So it's not surprising to see him doing this. And what's another thing that's very clear and very important to remember is that he seems to draw energy from these types of performances. He had a very combative, long press conference yesterday, and he felt great after that, according to all the reporting that we've seen. So now what we're going to see is another opportunity for him to recharge, not by doing the work of actually having to work with Capitol Hill, dealing with the mess in his National Security Council, but instead by talking to voters, talking to people that automatically support him just by the fact that they're there in the first place. He's talking to his backers, and he takes their energy from them, and, you know, it helps him feel better.
So he has the Boeing stop today. He has the Florida stop tomorrow. This all, though, comes after that long press conference yesterday at the White House. I'm curious how Republicans have been reacting to that performance from what you've heard.
There's a whole lot of silence on Capitol Hill among Republicans. There's obviously a bit of discomfort in some corners because what you saw was a very combative president who didn't like to stick to the main issues, the topics that Republicans like to talk about, like repealing and replacing Obamacare or tax reform. But instead what he did was he went after the media. He talked sort of incessantly about his campaign victory. For a lot of Republicans, that's uncomfortable reality. And for others, they basically say, listen, we can't say anything about this in public because our base supports him. So there's a sort of tango going on here with Hill Republicans who are trying to get him to focus on the issues that they care about. But if you're Donald Trump, you don't need those Hill Republicans. At least that's what he thinks.
Now to the National Security Advisor job. We've been talking about this all week long. Retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward turned it down after Monday, kind of debacle. Trump tweeted, quote, General Keith Kellogg, who I have known for a long time, is very much in play for NSA, as are three others. It really looks like this is going to be a tough job to fill at this point.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are others who are being talked about right now, but the reality is that Donald Trump is treating this sort of as another reality show, trying to make it a public spectacle of who he's going to choose for this job. A lot of this is in some ways to try and get people to move on from the scandal that forced Michael Flynn to resign from the job in the first place. But yeah, this is going to be very difficult to fill because the people who are in consideration for this are intelligence or military professionals who want things to be very in order. They want to have a lot of control. And what we've seen in the Trump White House so far is that there's not a lot of people who are able to have their own domains because a few folks at the top really want to have their fingers in everything. So what caused Harward to say no, and according to a lot of reports, is that he was not going to have full control of his staff. So it remains to be seen how President Trump is going to fill this role, but he has an interim director now, Kellogg, who he may be able to keep on for a bit longer.
I want to talk a little bit about something that came out today by the AP. They reported that the Trump administration is considering mobilizing the National Guard to round up undocumented immigrants. Here's what White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer had to say about that. Let's listen.
There is no effort to utilize the National Guard to round up unauthorized immigrants. I don't think you can be any clearer than that.
Do you have any idea then of why or how?
I don't know why. Do you have any idea why the AP recorded this?
I didn't do this report.
I know, but I'm saying that
we acquired.
I get it, but what I'm saying is that from what I'm just, I wish you guys had asked before you tweeted. But
well, we apparently did ask repeatedly about it.
I don't have any.
It's in the story. I can send you the story.
So he says it's not true, but the Associated Press did ask the White House for comment before publishing it. They didn't deny it at that point. The White House didn't. What do you make of this?
Well, if we want to look at this, devoid of the substance of the actual report, which shouldn't be 100% shocking given that Donald Trump did promise a, quote, deportation force, even though other Republicans don't want that. If we look at this tactically, what we could be seeing is a way for the White House to try and further discredit the news media that it's already at war with, according to people within the White House. Basically, the AP said that they reached out to the White House for comment and reached out to the Department of Homeland Security and didn't get any response. Then, after giving them enough time, published it, noting in the story that they didn't get any response. Then the White House says this is ridiculous. This is, to use their term, fake news. It's a pretty easy way for the White House to try and attack the credibility of news organizations. But, in the story itself, it says the White House did not return a request for comment. So it's unclear where this goes from here.
Yeah, interesting play, nonetheless. There's news today of a number of layoffs at the State Department as well. We've been talking about that a little bit. We've also learned no one from the State Department was in meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What does that signal to you?
Well, what's happening in the State Department is similar to what's happening in a lot of other agencies across the city of Washington, but also across the country, which is that this transition is going pretty slowly. In many cases, what you see over the transitions is that there are a lot of people in place to be sort of plugged into these agencies as soon as things get going with the new administration. That clearly hasn't happened in this case. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson does not have a full staff working for him yet. Some of this is because the White House wants to be involved in hiring of this staff, but part of this is also that this is an enormous infrastructure that needs to be built out, and it's clear that the folks who are in charge of moving this transition along have not necessarily done that in the past. These are not government professionals, so it's not clear that they were prepared for the scale of this transition. That said, we'll see how long it takes for them to fill a lot of these roles. As more and more reports come out about this kind of thing, there is mounting pressure on the administration to make sure that there is a full slate of staffers in each of these agencies.
Yeah. Finally, before I let you go, I want to talk about some of the drama unfolding on Capitol Hill. Scott Pruitt just confirmed head of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, despite an overnight protest from Democrats. Talk about why he's such a controversial figure here moving forward?
Well, the EPA is one big place where Democrats were always going to have a fight because Pruitt is the former Attorney General of Oklahoma, has very close ties to the oil and gas industry. He's not someone who talks about climate change in the way that Democrats would like to be quite to use that one phrase for that. But basically, to make a long story short, Democrats are trying to have as much resistance as possible for all of Trump's cabinet appointees at this point. And Pruitt is one who is basically a climate science denier, and the Democratic base has absolutely no patience for that kind of thing. So what you're seeing is Democratic senators saying, enough is enough. Let's go against this guy if we possibly can. Of course, they're not the majority, so they can only get so far.
Gabe, thank you so much for your insight. So much to talk about. I'm sure we'll have you again soon.
Thanks so much.